There is a kind of man the system has never figured out how to control. He is not rich in the way the magazines define rich. He does not have a yacht or a second home in Scottsdale or a portfolio managed by someone in a glass tower. What he has is something quieter and, if you understand how the machine actually works, something far more threatening to the people who built it. He has no leverage point, no mortgage they can threaten, no car note they can accelerate, no credit score they need him to protect, no employer whose phone call he is afraid to miss. He does not owe the bank. He does not owe the company. He does not owe the landlord or the leasing company or the revolving credit line at 18%. And because he owes nothing, he fears nothing. And a man who fears nothing is the one man no system on earth knows what to do with. The exit he took did not happen the morning they handed him a cardboard box. It did not happen the day the pension letter arrived with numbers that did not add up. It happened years earlier, quietly, in small decisions that looked like sacrifice at the time and looked like genius now. He left before they asked him to. And that is the only exit that is ever truly on your terms. Let me tell you about a man named Gerald. Gerald spent 31 years working for a mid-sized insurance company in the East Midlands of England, the kind of company with a logo you have seen on a roundabout billboard but could not describe from memory. He was not the CEO. He was not the flashy one. He was the man who showed up every single day, who knew the systems, who trained the people who eventually got promoted past him, who smiled at the retirement parties of colleagues who had done less and been rewarded more. Gerald did what his father told him to do. He stayed loyal, he worked hard, he kept his head down and trusted the institution. He paid his mortgage on time every month for 23 years. He paid off the car. He put a percentage into the pension scheme every payday, the one the company matched, the one they told him at orientation would take care of him. He did not gamble on stocks. He did not chase promotions with politics and theater. He delivered results and trusted that someone upstairs was keeping score. When he was 58 years old, the company announced a restructuring. That word, restructuring, is a very clean word for a very dirty thing. What it means, translated out of corporate into plain English, is that someone in a room you will never enter has looked at a spreadsheet and decided that your salary, your health coverage, your pension contribution, and your 20 years of institutional memory cost more than the number in the cell next to your name. Gerald's role was eliminated. Not Gerald himself, of course. They were very careful about that. The role. As if the role and the man who had given his adult life to it were separate things that could be cleanly divided. He was offered a severance package that represented about 14 months of his salary, which sounds decent until you understand that at 58, in a specialized field, in a regional market, 14 months is almost certainly not enough time to rebuild the income he lost. He applied to 17 positions over the following year. He was called back by 4. He received 2 offers. Both were for significantly less than his final salary. He is still working now, not because he wants to be, because the mortgage he faithfully paid for 23 years still has 4 years left on it. Because the pension that was supposed to replace his income does not fully kick in for another 3 years. Because the math that was sold to him over 3 decades does not actually add up the way the brochure suggested. Gerald did not fail. Gerald was the most loyal, most dependable, most by-the-book participant in the system you could find. And the system discarded him anyway, on a timeline that was entirely its own, with a severance package calculated by people who will never know his name. What Gerald experienced is not a story about one unlucky man in the English Midlands. It is a story about a design that was not built for Gerald's benefit, that it was never built for Gerald's benefit, that it was built with Gerald's participation in mind, but not Gerald's interests at heart. And the reason it is important that you understand this as a design rather than as bad luck or bad timing or the unfortunate byproduct of a changing economy is this: designs can be understood. Designs can be stepped outside of. What happens to you by accident is something you recover from. What happens to you by design is something you need to see clearly before you can move around it. Gerald could not see the design clearly enough, early enough, to make different decisions. And the question that matters to you right now, wherever you are sitting as you listen to this, is whether you still have time to see it. Whether you are still early enough that the exit can be yours to choose rather than theirs to force. To understand the design, you need to go back to a specific moment. Not the Great Depression, though the Depression is part of it. Go back further. Go back to the 1900s, to a city called Frederick, Maryland, where a man named Frederick Winslow Taylor was being watched very closely by some very powerful people. Taylor was an engineer, and he had developed something he called scientific management. And what it meant in plain terms was this: he had figured out how to turn a human being into a predictable unit of production. Not just how to make workers more efficient, how to remove the worker's judgment from the equation entirely, how to break every job down into tasks so small and so repetitive that the person doing the task did not need to understand the whole, did not need relationships, did not need history, did not need loyalty or continuity. They needed only to show up and perform the motion. Taylor believed this was progress. The men who funded his research believed it was something more valuable than progress. They believed it was control. The system that grew out of Taylor's work over the following century did not stop at the factory floor. It migrated. It moved into offices and management layers, and eventually into the language of corporate restructuring that Gerald's company used when it eliminated his role. Because if a job can be broken into tasks small enough, any task can eventually be replaced. And if any task can be replaced, then no individual worker is ever truly irreplaceable. And if no individual worker is ever truly irreplaceable, then every worker, no matter how senior, no matter how loyal, no matter how many years of institutional memory they carry in their head, is always a line item that can be reviewed at the next quarterly planning meeting. You need to sit with that for a moment. Because what it means is that the loyalty Gerald gave, the 31 years of showing up, of knowing the systems, of training the people who were promoted past him, that loyalty had a specific dollar value assigned to it by someone who never met him. And when the number next to his name exceeded what the spreadsheet said he was worth, the loyalty was returned to him in the form of a 14-month severance package and a handshake. This is not cynicism. This is not bitterness. This is the mechanism described as plainly as it can be described. Taylor built the philosophy. The corporations built the machine. And the machine has been running continuously ever since. The mortgage is the clearest part of the machine, and it is the part that most people never look at straight. When you took out your mortgage, or when Gerald took out his, the bank was not doing you a favor. This is the foundational misunderstanding that the system depends on you never correcting. The bank was not generously providing access to capital so that you and Gerald could build stable lives. The bank was purchasing something, What it purchased was a claim on your future labor. A 25-year mortgage is a 25-year contract that obligates you to produce income every month without interruption, or lose the thing you were told you were building equity in. Think about what that means for your psychology. Think about what you will tolerate from an employer when you know that the alternative to tolerating it is missing a mortgage payment. Think about what you will swallow, what conversations you will not have, what lines you will not draw. When the consequence of drawing those lines is a letter from the lender and an acceleration clause and a foreclosure process, the mortgage is not just a financial instrument, it is a behavioral instrument. It makes you manageable. It makes you predictable. It gives every employer who knows you, have won, a very specific kind of leverage over you that they do not need to exercise openly because you exercise it on yourself. You wake up every morning and the mortgage is already doing the work. It has already told you what you can and cannot say. It has already negotiated on behalf of your employer before you walk through the door. And when you pay it off, when you finally get there, the system immediately begins suggesting new instruments to replace it. A home equity line of credit, a renovation loan, a second property. Because a man with no debt is a man the system has lost its grip on, and the system does not let go without offering you something else to hold on to. Now, let me tell you about a woman named Patricia. Patricia is 63 years old. She lives in Phoenix, Arizona, where she worked for 29 years as a hospital administrator, the kind of steady professional career that used to be the definition of security. Patricia was not careless with money. She contributed to her retirement account every year her employer matched it, and several years they did not. She carried a credit card for emergencies and paid it in full most months, the responsible way, the way the personal finance articles told her to. She owned a house she had been paying on for 22 years. When the hospital system she worked for was acquired by a larger network, Patricia was 59 years old. The new management conducted what they called a talent review, which is another clean word for a dirty process, and Patricia's position was reclassified as redundant with a role that already existed in the acquiring organization. She was offered a choice between a reduced role at a 20% salary cut or a voluntary separation package. The voluntary separation package was designed in such a way that if she accepted it, she would lose access to the retiree health benefits she had been accruing for 2 decades. If she rejected it and took the reduced role, she would be in a position that everyone in the new organization understood to be temporary. A waiting room for an eventual layoff that would not even include the voluntary separation bonus. She took the package. She is now 63 years old, 2 years away from Medicare eligibility, with a gap in health coverage she is filling with private insurance that costs her more per month than her car ever did. Her retirement savings are intact, but because she stopped contributions 4 years early, and because she has been drawing on savings to cover the insurance gap, the nest egg that was supposed to last her through her late 80s is now projected by her own calculations at the kitchen table to fall short by somewhere between 6 and 11 years. Patricia did nothing wrong. She played the game the way the rulebook described. She made responsible choices. She saved. She planned. The system moved the finish line. But here is the part that nobody tells you. And I want you to stay with this, because this is the turn, this is the moment where the whole first half of what I have been telling you gets reframed into something more important than a list of injustices. The system did not move the finish line on Patricia and Gerald because it is malicious. Malice would almost be easier, because malice has an enemy, and enemies can be fought. The system moved the finish line because that is exactly what it was engineered to do. The finish line is supposed to move. A finish line that stays still is a finish line that people cross, and people who cross finish lines become people who have won, and people who have won no longer need to participate. The entire architecture of debt, of 30-year mortgages and revolving credit and employer-controlled retirement accounts, and benefit systems that require continued employment to access, all of it is designed with one primary engineering goal: keep the participant participating, keep the borrower borrowing, keep the employee employable enough to be useful but not so secure that they become optional. The machine does not want you to finish. The machine wants you to be close to finishing, always, perpetually, just close enough that you will keep showing up. And the cruelest part, the part that Gerald understood only in retrospect, and Patricia is still working through, is that the game is refereed by the same institution that profits from you playing it. The bank that holds your mortgage is the same institution that decides what your credit score means. The employer who offers you the retirement account also decides whether the account vests before they let you go. The system that tells you to be responsible, to save, to be loyal, to stay, is the same system that reserves the right to change the terms at any moment and for any reason it considers valid. You have been playing a game where your opponent writes the rules, enforces the rules, and profits from your continued belief that the rules are fair. The men and women who see this clearly, who see it early enough to act, do not see it as a conspiracy. That is important. Conspiracy requires coordination, and this requires nothing so deliberate. This is just engineering. It is the same way a casino is engineered. The casino does not cheat. The casino does not need to cheat. The casino only needs to ensure that the architecture of the game, the rules, the odds, the layout of the room, the absence of clocks, the presence of free drinks, produces a predictable outcome at scale. Not every player loses. That would end the game. Some players need to win, visibly, loudly, in a way that other players can see, so that the belief in the possibility of winning remains alive. The mortgage system works the same way. The employment system works the same way. The retirement system works the same way. Someone has to win. The winner becomes the story that is told to justify the game. But the question that matters to you is not whether someone wins. The question is whether the odds are written in your favor or against you. And once you have looked at Patricia's situation and Gerald's situation and the Taylor engineering philosophy and the behavioral function of debt, I think you already know the answer. The answer is not comfortable. But the answer is yours now, and you cannot give it back. So what does the man who sees this clearly actually do differently? This is the part where most conversations about this topic veer into a list. 5 steps to financial freedom. 7 habits of the debt-free man. And I'm not going to do that, because the list is not the point. The list is itself a product of the same kind of thinking that built the trap. The belief that if you just execute the right sequence of actions, the system will reward you. What I am talking about is not a sequence of actions. It is a shift in the thing you are optimizing for. For most of your working life, you have been, without perhaps choosing it consciously, optimizing for participation, for being a good employee, for being a credit-worthy borrower, for being a person whose financial life is legible to institutions that need your legibility to manage you. A high credit score is not a number that tells the world you are trustworthy. It is a number that tells the world You are deeply embedded in the debt system and actively managing your embedding. It is a measure of how well you have trained yourself to be useful to lenders. When Gerald's credit score was pristine after 30 years of on-time payments, that score did not protect him. It did not extend his employment. It did not preserve his pension. It did not give him any leverage in the negotiation that ended his career. His creditworthiness was a thing the lenders valued, not a thing that valued him. The man who exits on his own terms has stopped optimizing for his credit score and started optimizing for something harder to measure and infinitely more valuable. He's optimizing for the elimination of every point at which an external institution has power over his decisions. Every time a mortgage payment disappears, a line of potential coercion disappears with it. Every time a debt is retired, a behavioral instrument goes dark. Every time a fixed income expense is removed from his monthly obligations, the number he needs to survive falls, and when the number he needs to survive falls, the number of jobs he is willing to tolerate falls with it, and when the number of jobs he is willing to tolerate falls, the power the employer had over him begins to evaporate. This is not a theory. This is arithmetic. And the arithmetic is always in your favor if you start early enough. The question of timing is the one that cuts deepest, because the man who sees this at 45 has a different set of moves than the man who sees it at 60. But here is what I want you to understand, and I want you to hold this carefully, because it is the thing that gets lost in every conversation that focuses too hard on the numbers. The exit is not a number. It is a posture. It is a relationship with your own obligations. A man who is 62 years old, with a paid-off house, a modest pension that covers his actual needs, no outstanding debt of any kind, and a clear sense of exactly what his monthly cost of living is, that man is not waiting for a number in an account to hit a threshold. He is already positioned. He is already in the exit lane. The cardboard box, if it ever comes, is an inconvenience and not a catastrophe. The restructuring, if it comes, is someone else's problem more than his. The performance review, which every man past 50 understands, is increasingly a ceremony rather than an evaluation, does not keep him awake, not because he's wealthy in the way the magazines define it, because he has systematically removed the leverage points that would make anyone else's decision about his employment into a crisis about his survival. That is the target, not the number, the posture. And the posture begins with the first obligation you retire and ends only when you decide it ends, not when they decide. Go back to Gerald for a moment. Think about Gerald at 45 instead of 58. Think about what his life looks like if, at 45, Gerald had looked at the next 13 years and made one single decision about how to allocate his surplus income, not toward a bigger house, not toward a new car that his colleagues would notice, toward the retirement of every debt he carried, as aggressively and as quickly as the math allowed, toward building a cost of living so low that his monthly needs could be met by his pension alone, even a reduced pension, even an early pension, even a pension that activated before the official retirement age. Think about what it means for Gerald's negotiation with the company at 58 if his mortgage is gone, if his only fixed costs are utilities and food and the modest pleasures of a man who has learned not to need much. Think about how differently that conversation goes. Not because Gerald is richer, because Gerald needs less from them. A man who needs less from you has more power over you than a man who needs everything you offer. The severance package that felt like a lifeboat at 58 becomes a minor detail at 62 if Gerald has spent the previous decade making himself impossible to financially coerce. Gerald did not get that chance. You might still have it. The wisest exit is always the one that happens before they ask you to leave. Not because leaving early is the goal, not because work is the enemy, or loyalty is foolish, or institutions are universally corrupt, but because the exit that happens on your timeline, with your preparation, in a situation where you have chosen what you need and eliminated what you do not, that exit puts you in the position of a man who walked through a door rather than a man who was pushed through one. The difference is not just financial. It is about who you are when you are on the other side. A man who is pushed through a door spends years looking back at it. A man who walked through it on his own terms rarely looks back at all. The system will always have another door to push you through if you remain inside it long enough and remain dependent enough on what it offers. The interest rate will adjust. The benefit will be reclassified. The role will be restructured. The pension will be modified. The terms will change in ways the fine print always technically permitted, and your trust in the institution never anticipated. But a man outside the machine, a man who retired his debt and reduced his needs and built his income around permanence rather than employment, that man is watching the door from the outside. And the people who design the door, the people who profit from the pushing, they know exactly what that man represents. Because a man who needs nothing from the system is the only man the system cannot control.